some reason, when I got to elementary school, those kids didn't think that it was so endearing. In fact, my googly eyes, I had crossed eyes when I was born. Then other opportunities came, and then that's where you really have to check yourself. Am I living in fear? Am I willing to make that jump to go try something that I've always really wanted to do and see if it works out?
Welcome to the Jeff Glines Show, where success isn't just about the destination, but the journey. Behind every success story lies untold challenges and lessons. I'm Jeff Glines, and I'm here to take you behind the scenes with business leaders and entrepreneurs. We'll explore the real stories behind the success, the challenges, the late nights, and the breakthroughs. If you're looking for raw, real insights into the world of business, you're in the right place. Subscribe to the Jeff Glines Show on your favorite podcast platform. Join us for new episodes every week, and let's dive into what it really takes to succeed.
Okay, let me introduce today's guest, Joe Newman, a dynamic public speaker, author, and passionate advocate for mental health. Joe brings an incredible mix of education and experience to the table with degrees in business management from UVU and human development and family studies from the University of Utah. He also served as the chief information officer for a group of mental health clinics, where he gained invaluable insights into supporting individuals and families. Now self-employed, Joe focuses his energy on teaching and empowering others through his personal progression program, Life Launch University. On top of his professional accomplishments, Joe is a devoted family man. He and his wife, Emily, are the proud parents of 9 amazing children and share a heartfelt mission to create programs that help individuals, businesses, and families unlock their potential, master essential mental health tools, and build stronger, brighter futures. So I'm thrilled to have Joe here today and looking forward to hear his insights today. And welcome to the show, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's been fun to get to know you, and I'm glad you're able to get on here, and we can kind of pick your brain a little bit and teach our audience.
Absolutely.
Something about resilience and grit and those things that we so need today, both in adults and children. So
this is one of my favorite topics because of just how needed it is out there, how misunderstood grit is, and how we're not really teaching it or the principles of resilience. We used to be able to kind of rely on nature to be able to provide these lessons, but we've eliminated most all of our discomforts in life that we don't usually have to go through, true hard stuff. We do hard things, and hard things are like the hard things of today were the normal things of yesterday. So this is one of my favorite.
Take the trash out. Take the trash out.
Man, that's a hard thing. Good job, buddy, doing hard things, taking the garbage out. So we've got to reset the dial a little bit, and I'm excited to be able to present some of these principles.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of a little bit, so the audience kind of understands your background a little bit. Can you share your professional background and personal experiences that have uniquely prepared you to teach and advocate for resilience in families and businesses? So maybe just share a little bit of your background that we kind of talked about.
You bet. So personal experiences, things that have prepared me uniquely for this. So a little while ago, there was a little boy who was born into this world with what most people would say was a little bit less than perfect. And while my mom thought my crossed eyes were really endearing and that it was adorable having a 1.5-year-old kid running around with glasses on, for some reason, when I got to elementary school, those kids didn't think that it was so endearing. In fact, my googly eyes, I had crossed eyes when I was born. At 1.5 years old, I had a surgery that they, shortened the eye muscles, and it allowed my eyes to work. They were independent. And I developed what's known as amblyopia, where you look out of one eye and the other eye wanders. And so I could do this like with either eye. It just depended whichever eye I was looking out of at the time, and the other eye would wander. And so, I had googly eyes growing up, and all the time, like, it became the source of a lot of ridicule as a kid. And I mean, both like mental and emotional and physical. I got beat up like physically beat up,
Jeez.
a lot, and kind of tormented. But and we look at that from the perspective today, and it's like, man, that is so bad. That is so bad. That really does damage to people. Well, I came to learn as I grew up that kind of everybody gets tormented in some way in elementary school and middle school, and some worse than others. And I remember like being able to put myself in the spectrum, like I got made fun of for my glasses or whatever. But there were kids that were getting made fun of because they were maybe like smaller or skinnier or not very like socially charismatic or whatever, right? The nerds or whatever. And there was this like spectrum of who gets made fun of, everybody kind of gets made fun of on this spectrum to some degree. Even the popular kids, like among them, they're kind of making fun of each other and other people behind their backs, whatever. So, we've kind of like criminalized this kind of behavior amongst kids. But I'm so grateful that my parents didn't react the way that most parents do today by like immediately going to the administration of the school and the other parents of the kids and the bus driver and the authority figures and saying, it's not right for you to treat my son this way. My son's being bullied and we need to stop it. What did they do? Instead, they said, you know what, Joe? You're a strong kid. You can do it. Here's what you do. Go get him. And they'd send me back out the door full of confidence and encouragement to go overcome those challenges myself, right? And that's one of the major differences that we're seeing in our upbringing of our children today.
So just that experience, obviously, I heard a talk that you gave a public speak. You were a speaker at one of the events, and you talked about that. And that obviously has prepared you for loving this topic because you're self-made, because you had to go through this and your parents. I love that. Yeah, that is.
Well, and I see my own kids going through it to some other degrees, right? Now, most of my kids, none of my kids have any kind of, what I grew up knowing as a birth defect, even that, like that concept, oh, I'm defective, like from birth. There was a lot of like mental and emotional reconciliation I had to go through with that. And none of my kids have any of that, but yet they still get bullied, for little things here and there, or made fun of and poked fun at, and there's good reason for they come home and they, crying, so-and-so said something mean to me and this and that, and I'm so grateful for my personal upbringing to help me learn like, okay, this is not a call for parents to step in and stop the hard stuff. It's a call for parents to support their kids through the inevitable hard stuff, the stuff that's supposed to be that way so that we grow up strong and resilient.
Yeah. And just so people don't misinterpret, like did when you were getting beat up, did your parents even step in? Like if you were getting like beat up and punched and kicked or whatever, you had to, you just had to have, you had the confidence to go out there and your parents supported you and said, go punch him back if you need to.
You know what they did? They bought us boxing gloves.
Nice.
I'm not kidding you. We had boxing gloves, and I was just telling my dad and my brother this the other day, how grateful I was for those boxing gloves, because I would box at home my older brothers. And so I was used to like facing off against bigger, older people.
Yeah.
And I was very confident in my ability, because even though they would pound me, and like I was really going through harder stuff, but I just learned that I have to get back up and keep going in order to survive this. And then so when it came to like kids of my own age in my own school, right? If they ever started to try to get physical with me, I was confident in my physical abilities. And so it never really ever came to that. It's not like I got in a lot of fights. In fact, I would talk down a lot of fight invitations and let them know, like, this isn't going to end well for you if you really want to get physical here. And yeah, the verbal, bullying or whatever would continue. But yeah, I gained a lot of confidence through physical, being confident in my physical abilities.
Yeah. I
wrestling. Later, I became a wrestler. And that's really when all the bullying stopped. I got to high school and I was a wrestler, and I was hanging out with the biggest, toughest guys on campus. And they were probably some of my best bullies. Those guys were like, they would ridicule me for my eyes, but they knew that I would hold my own on the mat. And so it wasn't a matter of like, beating down my self-confidence.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
became like a razzing each other, like a brotherly, like jabbing and endearing, actually. Like you learn to, like a lot of guys learn how to strong relationships kind of based on making fun of each other, like being able to jab each other. And that concept is like totally lost on today's society. Like it's like criminalized to say anything wrong or mean to somebody. And yet it's the concept of being able to make and take a joke.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be people listening to this go like, what the crap? What's this guy talking about? I'm sure there's going to be those people because they're out there just enabling their kids, enabling everything that they're doing. You see it, like you said, more and more today. Rather than building that confidence, it's not like your parents didn't do anything. They said, Joe, you're amazing. You go out there, you do this, and if you need help, we're here to back you. But you got it, buddy.
And it never came to the point where I came home with like bloody noses and black eyes and stuff. That it was an obvious sign of, like, I don't know, trauma or whatever.
Yeah.
It was, I came home with tears many times, and they'd lovingly put their arm around me, tell me I'm wonderful and that I can handle it. I'm doing it, encouragement. And here's the thing, you're right. There will be a lot of people that are like, this is like wrong. This is bad. But I grew up in the era of the 80s and 90s, right? When you think about the 80s and the 90s, I call it the era of comebacks. You remember this? Like it was a sign of your intelligence and your social status on your ability to come up with intelligent comebacks and defend yourself, right?
I did not have that. My parents
have that. Wow.
I didn't have a lot of self-confidence growing up. My parents would always like support me and do that, but I think it was just more or less I had to figure it out and build that confidence. It just took me a little longer. I mean, I had confidence in other things, but you just sometimes, I think some kids have more confidence than others. Sometimes it takes longer for others as well to build that confidence. But I wasn't really bullied or anything, but I just kind of like was more self-deprecating. Like, I suck at basketball. I'm not that good. Or I would talk down to myself. And, my dad would try to teach me, like, go look in the mirror, tell yourself you're great. You got the, he would try to build the confidence in me, but it took me a little longer, I think, than most kids. So, I don't know.
So you said a couple of really important things there.
Jeff Glines here. And before we get back to the show, I just want to share a quick tip for all you business owners. If you haven't heard of dual pricing when it comes to payment processing, then I want to share my free guide on how to eliminate 100% of your credit card fees in your business. And I'll share a link in the description. Go ahead and click on that link. You're not going to want to miss this, and you can thank me later. Back to the show.
I want to kind of get a better idea from where you're coming from. If it sounds like I was able to kind of determine, okay, this spectrum of guys, in their, who's getting bullied or whatever.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you were maybe what I would call at the time one of the sideline guys, where you weren't taking heat, but you weren't stepping out where you would draw the heat, right?
Yeah.
And I actually really admired those guys. And a lot of times it was like, man, it'd be nice to be one of those guys. Like, those guys don't really get, a lot of the heat here, but it still looks like they're participating and having fun. But I couldn't be one of those guys just because of my glasses.
Yeah.
Me a part that everybody could easily target.
Yeah.
And so, but this concept of the comeback era, it's evident how when you go back and watch like the TV shows and the popular media of the 80s and 90s, you're thinking like Michael J. Fox and Teen Wolf, and you're thinking like, Home Improvement, and the whole like basis of these shows and their comedy is kind of verbal banter, and your ability to come back with with, somebody says something kind of snarky or mean to you, you don't stop and just go, that's mean. That's bullying. You go have a thoughtful, clever kind of retort that's going to help that person understand that you can hold your own.
Yeah.
And so this was the culture largely that I grew up in, that we grew up in. And some people maybe had to learn that art more profoundly than others by nature, but it was a celebrated skill to be able to be confident and come back.
Yeah.
And the other thing you said was, I had to figure it out. That's a crucial key. That's one of my chapters in one of my books is called Figure It Out. Like teaching your kids that life is not about having everything perfect and delivered to you perfectly the first time, right? It's the concept of, we're going to figure this out. So one way that this expresses itself in today's culture is, I like to use the Maps app as an example. I don't know if any of the listeners out there can relate to this, but if you ever are driving somewhere and you got your kids in the backseat and you're following the Maps app and maybe you miss your turn and you have to turn around, right? Now, I've had experiences both with my own kids and with other kids through youth activities and stuff, that they'll be like, oh no, you missed your turn. We have to make a U-turn. As if it was like a major failure, like, we failed. We missed the turn when they told us we were supposed to turn. And it's like, no, guys, U-turns are a regular part of life. And it's totally okay. You miss your turn. That's the beauty of a U-turn. You just flip it around and you figure it out. You go find that turn and you can correct those mistakes. Today's youth particularly, and now, I mean, we're talking the millennial generation, okay? There's a major part of the workforce today comes from the millennial generation who were raised with smartphones, who were raised with this technology where everything is hand delivered to you and just like perfectly packaged, and they've never had to understand the value of figuring it out. It's like, if Google doesn't give me the answer in 2.5 seconds, then it's too much work, and that's what we're seeing, this lack of resilience, the lack of realizing life is actually about figuring it out.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, so what is the difference between resilience and grit? You talk about both, and what is essential is it you have to have both. What's the difference? Be able to progress.
Okay. So grit is an interesting conversation because there's a lead researcher out of NYU that I forget her name off the hand, but she talks about grit and how, their best estimation is that some people are born with it and some people aren't. And she's like, and how do you teach grit? Well, we don't know. There's this clip I use in my presentation of her TED Talk speech. And she's like, we don't know how you teach grit. Well, the good news is that within the last 20 years, we've actually learned the physiological process of teaching grit. There's actual things that happen in your brain, and the neuroscience shows us through current brain scan technology, you can see where different parts of the brain are illuminated during different stimulus. And we've learned why your brain reacts the way it does and how, and then we're able to prescribe specific exercises to help actually build that grit. So grit and resilience, are really kind of synonymous. In my mind, I feel like grit, I think in the popular psychology world, comes from more of like this street smarts, like you grew up on the streets and got pushed around a bunch. And so now you came up with grit, maybe people would look at me and say, he's got grit because of his, natural ability to step back up and get back into the fight, the boxing match or the wrestling match or whatever. That's grit.
Yeah.
Well, really it's resilience, and resilience is just that ability to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going. And that might mean physically, that might mean emotionally, that might mean spiritually, that might mean economically, right? That means in business. Like this resilience concept applies to all aspects of our lives. That means in your relationships, right? Do your relationships need resilience? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. Because
Yeah.
relationships by nature are difficult. If you don't have resilience in relationships, then you don't have relationships. They end,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The whole definition of a relationship is that you go through the hard stuff together. Yeah, you experience good stuff together, but there's lots of kids, that I went through the good stuff with at high school that I don't have a relationship with anymore
Yeah.
because, we got out of touch. We didn't go through the hard stuff together.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Those kids, those people that I've gone through the hard stuff with, maintain that relationship. So yeah, resilience is crucial for every aspect of our life.
Nice. Well, you talk about business too, and a lot of our audience is maybe business owners or wanting to start a business. Maybe what can adults do if they're starting a business or they're having some setbacks with their business, or maybe in the future when they have the setbacks, what can they do to get that resilience, or I guess that exercise that muscle of resilience and grit? I mean, is it just waiting for that time when it comes and figuring it out, or is there something they can do to prepare themselves?
Okay, yes. So figuring it out is one of the prime concepts, right? You have to understand that nobody's just going to hand you the success that you desire, right? Nobody's just going to come up and give you the money that you want or whatever. You have to figure it out. And so you'll come up with ideas, or thoughts and ideas or inspiration will come to you. And your goal is to put it to the test, try it, and be willing to fail over and over and over. Okay. And so then you ask, well, how do you do that? Well, there are some actual exercises, mental and cognitive exercises that can give you that grit or that resilience to keep going. So for example, one of which is proven to be very powerful is the concept of mindfulness practices. And these are becoming less and less a part of nature, primarily because of this thing. This thing dominates every 5 seconds of our lives. I mean, think about it. If you have to wait for anything more than 5 seconds, what happens? Wham! This thing comes out. You start busying yourself with this, right? And it's almost like this social drive to do that. It's like, oh, I need to look important, so I'm going to pull out my phone and do something productive or whatever. And you're playing Candy Crush or something, right? Like, no. Before these, what did we do with those extra moments?
Talk to somebody next to you, or try to maybe just kind of, if you didn't want to engage with anybody, if you're an introvert, you'd probably just kind of look down and, I don't know. I mean, it just probably depends on your personality, but
Depending on your personality.
But if it was an awkward moment, a lot of people would just kind of like, well, I guess I'll talk to somebody here in the grocery line, or
nail
whatever.
on the head. You hit the nail on the head. Extroverts, they start trying to connect with people, right?
Yeah.
You start talking to whoever's around you. Introverts, they tend to observe, right? And so you're looking around, maybe you're looking down, maybe you're looking up. But this concept of you're turning your thoughts inwardly, right? You have some spare time. You become aware of yourself. And this is one of the major elements that is affecting our personal resilience today, is that we're less and less self-aware of like the emotions that we're experiencing, of our own individual thought process. And I call it inspiration. You either receive inspiration or temptation or misguiding, whatever you want to call it. But that process of, I have some time to sit here and think about and feel what the universe is sending my way. And am I going to listen to it and take action on it? Or do I, busy myself and be entertained and totally miss it? And so I like to, like when I'm out in the world, whether I'm like, say, buying tires, for example, right? You're buying tires, you're going to have like an hour and a half of sitting in the lobby where you got nothing to do because you have no wheels. And, it's like, okay, well, I can jump on my phone and answer emails or whatever. Or let's sit still for a minute and observe and maybe talk to that person who's next to you. they're probably on their phone. And so it's going to be awkward to be like, hey, let's talk. And I don't even know you. You see how that's become awkward now? That used to be part of normal culture.
Yeah.
And our bodies crave that, actually. So this is another one of the things that we've learned through neuroscience, is that our bodies create this amazing hormone. It's a neurotransmitter called oxytocin when we interact with people eye to eye, face to face, arm in arm. So the sad thing is right now, you and I, Jeff, we're not creating oxytocin. And anybody listening to this is not creating oxytocin. It's that long-term reward hormone that leaves you satisfied and you go away feeling like, oh man, that was great being with that person. When we interact through screens, they can actually measure the amount of oxytocin in your bloodstream, and you don't create oxytocin when you interact with people through screens. Okay. You create dopamine, which is this short-term reward hormone that expires very quickly, and your body craves more and more and more of it. It's the same addictive hormone that comes from when you gamble or drink or look at pornography or scroll endlessly on your phone. That's all dopamine. It's never satisfying, and it just really sucks you into that addictive behavior. But really what your body is craving is that hormone, the long-term happy hormone, oxytocin.
Yeah.
And so that's where, like, when Jeff, you and I connected at that meeting, we talked and we sat at a table together, right? That's why those in-person interactions are so valuable.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, so much of technology is replacing that a lot of people, especially in the business world, are missing out on that. And a lot of big tech companies who went totally remote have recognized the difference that, no, actually, in order for our teams to feel connected, we actually need to be physically present with each other more often. And so, like you've maybe heard about in some of the recent media, I think Google and Facebook and a few others were like pulling their employees back into the office, saying we've got to have meetings regularly just to build teamwork.
Mm.
And so don't underestimate the power of physical, human, eye-to-eye, face-to-face interactions in business. That's one way that you can help build that resilience.
And that's valuable. That probably, even in the business world too, in setting appointments. I mean, if it's possible and you're in a hometown and you can go face-to-face with that business owner, if you're trying to sell them something, then you're going to have a lot more success face-to-face than you are probably over, Zoom or on a phone call. I mean, you can adapt, of course, but yeah, I know the difference. I love to be in front of people when I'm trying to talk to them about something that they need, or you're selling something. You can just feel their energy. You can adapt to their energy. They feel a little bit more inclined to listen to you because they, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. So go ahead.
We talked about mindfulness a little earlier too, so there's that, desire to connect with somebody.
Yeah.
Then the mindfulness element, really what it is turning your attention inward to your physical well-being. So one easy way to do this is focus on your breathing. And it's not just like pay attention to your breathing. There's actual methodology to it. And one of which I really enjoy using is called paced breathing. And it's where you count in, you breathe in for the count of 4, and then you breathe out for the count of 6.
Do you hold your breath? Do you hold your breath at all? Or you just
There's some that you can hold your breath. Yeah.
Okay.
There's another one called boxed breathing, where you go breathe in for the count of 4, you hold for the count of 4, you breathe out for the count of 4, and you hold for the count of 4.
I've heard that before. Yeah. Okay.
That's one that the Navy SEALs like to use, and it's very effective in really highly emotional or critical situations. And so very often, like when I'm preparing for a speech or to go up on stage and I start to feel those jitters and nervousness, right? I like paced breathing. So then the reason it works is when you breathe in, your heart rate naturally goes up. But when you breathe out, your heart rate naturally goes down. So if the overall time of breathing out is greater than the overall time of breathing in, then your heart rate decreases, right? This is the same methodology that Wim Hof uses in his cold plunge.
Yeah.
You focus on your breathing. You're in some perceived emergency or threat. And when you focus on your breathing, you turn your logical thought process onto the hindbrain, which is where all your automatic life support functions come from, like your breathing and digestion and all that. You give yourself that mental awareness, especially focused on breathing, then all of a sudden it reassures. There's this tiny little piece of the brain called the amygdala, and its whole job is to set off that fight, flight, or freeze response. And so when your body says, okay, we're still breathing, we're okay, I'm intentionally checking systems to make sure we're all right, then the amygdala can calm down, quiet, and you'll find that heightened state of intense emotion will decrease. So it's super effective all over a business world. When you're preparing for meetings, when you're preparing for presentations, even like when you're in your office and you're working on something, you've been pounding your head against the wall, trying to get something done, and it doesn't feel like it's moving, and you're getting frustrated and you feel like you can't move forward because of that frustration.
Yeah.
This is a time to exercise.
What's the count again? Breathing in and breathing out. 4,
So
6.
you breathe in for the count of 4, breathe out for the count of 6. And it doesn't have to be those numbers. So I do a little bit of free diving. This is where you hold your breath and try to dive as deep as you can. And the whole purpose of this is you have to regulate your physical body as well as your emotional needs to go down, and I'm not really great at this. I've been able to go down to about 55 feet for about 2 minutes underwater. And that in the world of free diving is not very impressive. It's kind of like the beginner stage. But for most people, when they think about being 55 feet under the water for 2 minutes, they're thinking, I'm drowning, I'm dying, right?
Yeah.
And so you learn to train your mental needs, especially your overwhelming survival needs like breathing, to say, it's okay, we're in control, we're fine, we're going to do this activity, in a controlled manner. And that's how you start to train it. So in that setting, in my paced breathing, I'll sometimes get to breathe in for the count of 5 and then breathe out for the count of 10, because that output is greater than the input. It will downregulate your emotion, downregulate your heartbeat, your blood pressure, and increase your mental awareness too. It takes away a lot of.
It's funny you bring that up though, because I had growing up, I had claustrophobia, and I really wanted to learn to scuba dive, and I had to do that. I had to.
Hard,
and I remember diving where you could not see in front of you.
Yeah,
and I had to do the breathing exercise and basically talk my mind like, it's okay, this is okay. And I kind of pat myself on the back because I had claustrophobia. Like, I couldn't get in an elevator.
wow.
I mean, if I got in an elevator, I would my heart would just start pounding, and I'd rather take the stairs.
And for anybody who hasn't scuba dived, they maybe don't realize how claustrophobic it really is. Like the mask and the cold water on your face. I remember when I was certified, the most scary thing was when you have to take the mask off of your face, and then you put it back on and it's full of water, and then you have to clear the water out by blowing out of your nose, right? And that same technique came up then, and my instructor told me, when you take your mask off, just focus on your breathing. You got to take your mask off. That's fine. Just realize you're still breathing. There's no problem. You're just going to put the mask back on and clear it. And so, really paying attention to your physical body and what its needs are can greatly decrease the overwhelming emotional responses we're having.
Yeah, I love that. How does someone develop like this growth mindset to enhance their ability to bounce back from failure?
Yeah. Okay.
So,
I got this next concept, which goes perfectly with that. And this is a bit of cognitive work. Okay. This comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. And it has to do with this concept that when we're presented with partial information, but there's gaps in that information, it's human nature to fill in the gaps with the worst doomsday results, right? Whatever I didn't get that job, right? I didn't get that sale that I was going to need. And so that means, I'm not going to have the money that I need for this month. And that means I'm not going to be able to make my mortgage payment. And then my wife's going to be all upset with me. And then she's going to divorce me. And then I'm going to be like a lonely bum on the street. I'm going to lose all my family because I didn't make this one sale.
It's crazy how our mind does that, isn't it?
Our mind totally does that all the time. And so this cognitive work that we do it's affectionately known as talking out the story in my head. Okay. The story in your head is that fictional part that we made up. And when you actually speak it out, either to yourself or to someone else, maybe it's your wife, maybe it's your colleague, you're able to start separating fact from fiction. So you go to your wife and you say, man, honey, I did not get that sale today, which means I don't think we're going to have money for the mortgage this month. And that means, you're thinking I'm a terrible husband and can't provide. And that means that we're probably, you're going to divorce me and I'm going to be a lonely bum on the street. What do you think she's going to say?
She's like, where did you come up with that?
She's like, that's right. You better go get that sale. No. Most often they're going to be like, they'll kind of laugh. They'll kind of chuckle and they'll be like, sweetie, that's not true, right? And they'll be like, okay, thank you for reassuring me that I'm not going to be a lonely bum on the street for not getting that sale. But sometimes just talking out the story in my head is what we need in order to bring down that intense emotion and give us that resilience or that grit to say, okay, so that one didn't come through. Let's figure it out. Where's the next sale coming from? What do I need to do to get that next sale or to get that next job?
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about that, and obviously, I'm sure most people can relate to that where they've, exaggerated in their mind and filled in the blanks. And it's crazy how if you just, like you said, just talk through that. And then it's like, I have a business coach. So that is like lifesaver for me because I just go to him. I'll do that. I'll unload him like, yeah, this didn't happen, and I'm kind of like frustrated. And then he just goes, okay, can you make 15 more contacts today? I'm like, yeah. He goes, yeah, you'll feel better. Just go do 15 more contacts. It's okay. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Human nature, for some reason, we fill in the blanks with the worst doomsday scenarios, and rarely do they ever come true. One really good way to do this, as listeners are out this, thinking about who they can confide in, you gotta realize what's your support system. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your friend, maybe it's your business partner, maybe it's your dog, like seriously, your dog is actually a really good person to check your story in your head with because they'll love you no matter what, right? You tell them about all your failures and they're like, I don't care. They're not like mad at you that they might run out of food. They don't even know. They'll still give you love. And that's really what you need. And so being able to say, go to that person, whoever your support group is, and say, hey, can I check a story in my head with you? And then tell them the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they will help you be able to separate fact from fiction. And that's, I like to, my dad, I used to say really this saying that really stuck with me. He's like, I can't deal with fiction. I can deal with fact. You come bring me the facts and we can make decisions and move forward on facts. But the fiction, we can't progress with that. So it's irrelevant. Let's just push it aside and focus on the facts and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, my wife's really good at it. If I just say something like that, like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like your scenario. She's like, got this, you got this. And that's all it takes for me. And she knows that. And so she just listens and says, you got this. And I'm like, okay, I got this.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Okay. It'll work out.
It'll work out. And it's great to know who is your support system, like we said, because awesome that your wife is like that. Mine is too. My wife, like I'm not kidding you. I was testing her one time years ago. This was like maybe 15 years ago. I was like, hey, honey, I got an idea. Let's go dig a gold mine. I want to go into gold mining. And she was like, okay, that sounds good. Like she was supportive. And I was like, really? You would support me in that? I mean, that sounds like a crazy idea to me. I'm sure there's maybe people out there who are actually mining gold, but that's not like the first thought that a guy has, right? As a viable way to provide for his family. So, but she's that person for me too, that she will support me, encourage me, talk me through stuff.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
there are a lot of guys I've observed whose wives are not that way, right? You go to your wife and you have some idea or concern, and she's just going to amplify it. And she's going to like make, that's not your support group. Don't go to that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you have a friend that's that person. Maybe it's your business partner that's that person. Don't go to that person to talk through the story in your head. Go to the person who's of sound mind, who believes in you, who's encouraging, and they will help you sort through that story in your head.
That's good insight. And I guess to those, I heard a story, a young couple, and he lost his job. He goes home, tells his wife, like, I lost my job. She freaks out, leaves the house, runs away. Like, and he's just like, my gosh,
The worst case scenario just happened.
Yeah. And 2 years later, now they're, he's just like, I can't deal with this. And he's divorcing her, He's like, I just can't, he goes, I can't do this. Like, everything is so amplified, it's just like, so I guess that's good advice for both sides,
to their relationship, if you've got that kind of relationship, it's not that their marriage is bad. It's just that he might need to reevaluate who he uses as his counselor or his support group.
Yeah.
And that's okay. If she's not prepared to do that, that's okay. You can't expect her to do that if she's not equipped to do it.
Yeah. Because sometimes it takes time, Not every,
Honestly, I should invest in a support coach like you're talking about that you work with, a mentor who can really help work you through that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not your wife or your spouse, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. You have to know. I like that advice. Know your support system. So here's some advice I'm going to ask you, Joe. What advice would you give someone who feels stuck or defeated and is struggling to make any progress in their personal or professional life? Like someone that's just like got that, they're frozen, they're stuck, they're depressed.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm sure you've come across this with all your experiences.
Well, and me personally, like my career of 25 years, I've seen lots of twists and turns. Businesses open, businesses close, businesses fail. Some, didn't turn out as well as I hoped for, right? And here's what I recommend, highly, highly recommend, and there's a good amount of research to back this up, is to stop for a minute, okay? Get out of your office, get out of the city, go to nature, go somewhere you can put your phone away, get disconnected, and start to connect with nature and the universe and God, and find that inspiration, that direction that you need. Because our lives are just full of distraction, and most of the distraction is fueled off of fear, right? This is like one of the major industries in the world today is fear. Like, we can make people fear something, we can sell them something.
Yeah.
Right. That's the concept, which I don't subscribe to. I think that's a very destructive and manipulative way of doing business. But when you get away from that and you get into nature, maybe it's a hike, maybe it's sitting on the beach, maybe it's, I got this hill that's behind my house that every now and then when I need some direction, I just go hiking up that hill, forget about whatever I was supposed to do right now. I'm seeking direction. And so you go up and you sit and you be in, silence, eliminate distraction.
Love it.
I love especially being in an elevated position. I mean, some people in like a big city, maybe this is more difficult because they can't necessarily just get out of the city real fast. But being in an elevated position where you have a vantage point over like a viewpoint, I think there's some real magic to that, because you start to feel like you have scope or vision. And as you sit quietly, as quietly as you can, then
without your phone. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Guidance starts to come. And I recommend bringing a pad of paper and a pen with you, and because, it'll come, but it'll go quick. And so it's kind of like fishing for inspiration. And you sit there and you take notes. So a lot of this in the psychology world, this kind of leans towards the principles of journaling, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a lot of power, especially with pen and paper, because you're processing thoughts and emotions and, experiences, and journal out your hard stuff, get that hard stuff out of you by pushing it out of your body through your hand and pen onto the paper, but then allowing that inspiration to come and capture it by writing it down. And that can become a real roadmap for how to proceed.
Oh, I love that. And then there's I'm not sure exactly the numbers, but I think it's pretty close. I heard that like 70% of people want to start their own business, but only like 5% start it. So this kind of comes to like limiting beliefs and being able to, so yes, there's the people that are stuck. Maybe they want to start a business. They're doing their job right now, their day job, but they're just like, because they just keep kicking. I did this for years, just kept kicking it down the road. I started out self-employed for many years, and then the economy crashed. So I told myself all these lies that, I can never do it again. And then, I got a job, and then I'm like, what am I doing? I don't want to work in a job. I want to create my own stuff, so it's just, there's those limiting beliefs. There's those tragedies that happen, right? And people get stuck, but maybe some advice on limiting beliefs on the people that say, hey, I want to start a business, but literally, I think it was only like 5% actually start it, but 70% want to do it. They're like, oh yeah, let's do that. It'd be so fun to do that. And then they just never pull the trigger. There's no consistency. There's no action. There's no whatever. So give me some advice on that.
Well, I see that again. This goes back to fear for me. Like,
okay,
living in fear or rejecting fear. Because I've been self-employed for most of my career to some degree or another. I did go get a job and worked a job for a little while, and there's no shame in that. Like, I feel like working a job is very noble, especially at certain periods of your life. Like, there were times where I needed a W-2 in order to qualify for a loan to get my house. And I was really grateful for that W-2.
Yeah.
Right? Because as a self-employed person, you know that you're writing off all your expenses and you're trying to lower your taxable income. And so then you have this really low adjusted gross income, and you go to try to apply for a loan for that to get your house or whatever. So, I mean, I look at those times of when I've gone and had a job or, that as steps along the way that I was being guided. Because at the time, I felt like it was important, that I needed it, and it resulted in good things came my way and progress, like my house, right?
Yeah.
But then other opportunities came, and then that's where you really have to check yourself. Am I living in fear? Am I willing to make that jump to go try something that I've always really wanted to do and see if it works out? Yeah. And I say, even if it doesn't turn out as lucrative as you always dreamed of, I don't count that as a failure. Like, this is a U-turn, right? It goes back to the U-turn thing.
Yeah, love that.
We went one direction and, maybe we missed our mark, but now we're making a U-turn, and it's okay that we missed our mark because we saw what's down further and we knew that that was not where we wanted to go.
Yeah.
So now we're making a U-turn and we're figuring it out.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Well, I've got kind of a funny question for you here, because I know you're a funny guy, because I want to hang out with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if resilience were a superhero, what would its name and superpower be? And which one of your kids would probably insist on being your sidekick? Or be the superhero sidekick?
Okay, so if resilience were a superhero, what would the name of that superhero be?
And then also, what would the superpower be? And then which one of your kids would probably insist on being the sidekick with that super?
Okay.
You got 9 kids, so I got
9 kids. Okay, the name that came to my mind was Bounce Back Boy. I'm Bounce Back Boy, right? It's like this idea that you're going to get knocked down, but it doesn't matter if you get knocked down. If I can bounce back up, I never lose.
So what's the superpower? Bouncing back?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting knocked down and getting right back up.
No, that's probably your childhood right there in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually. And it was further reinforced through wrestling, like I love the sport of wrestling because you're willingly stepping into a fight over and over again. And it's going to hurt. It's going to be miserable, but that the reward of victory is worth it.
Yeah.
I love it. I've been a wrestling coach, for a few years and see that go through the kid's mind. And now I've had 3 kids in wrestling. And so you asked me which of my kids. I'm going to go with my son, Duke. I've got a son named Duke Newman, which
he'll just bounce back every time.
Since he was, I was just thinking about this today. He was probably my favorite toddler because at the age of 3 years old, he just had no fear. He was like, and not that he wasn't aware of danger. There's like that ignorance that some toddlers aren't even aware of the danger and they, can get themselves into danger. He wasn't like that. He perceived the danger, but he was willing to just jump in and go for it. For example, he's my youngest wakeboarder. Okay. We love wakeboarding.
Okay.
And I love wakeboarding more than wake surfing. And I know there's this like big this wake surfing.
It's like skiing and snowboarding, right? Same things.
This competition between the two, right?
Yeah.
And wake surfing has taken over. Like everybody loves to wake surf. We're like one of the last families who still loves wakeboarding. And I tell you why we love it. It's because it's high risk, high reward. You're going to jump the wake and hopefully you're going to land well, or you might catch an edge and really slap your face hard, right? It's like, you don't know which one it's going to be. Hopefully you're getting better so that you can minimize the times you slap your face. But everybody's got to go through that in order to achieve the
learning how to jump, right?
And so here's Duke at 3 years old. Like he knows that he's seen me go through the rigors of wakeboarding. And at 3 years old, he gets in the water and wakeboards long line. He starts just like everybody else does, way back behind the boat on his own. And I prepared him, I'd try to coach him through it in our, little kiddie pool at home. I put the wakeboard on him. I gave him the handle. I was like, here's what it's going to feel like. I was trying to prepare him for it. Now I've got 9 kids. And so far he's our 3rd kid and he's still the youngest. I've tried to get my kids to do it at 2 years old. They won't do it. I can't do it. In fact, most of them, even at 4, 5, and 6, they're still a little bit unsure of themselves. And it really comes down to that kid's bounce back ability, that ability to like take a wave over the face and come back up with a smile and be like, okay, I'm still fine, or whatever. They perceive some fear, but then they overcome it and they're like, oh, that's okay. I'm fine. And so, yeah, Duke would be my sidekick because he, I think, naturally has that ability.
I love that. So, yeah, also, I have another question for you. You got 9 kids. I imagine things can get pretty chaotic, I would imagine. So what's your go-to dad hack for maintaining your sanity when everything seems to be happening all at once?
My go-to dad
hack. Yeah, when life is just chaotic. Maybe it's that hill behind you. I don't know.
Okay. 2 things, I think. Number one, first and foremost, focus on my wife.
I used to love it.
When the kids are going nuts, screaming, crying, everybody talking all at once, that's rough.
Yeah.
And she's feeling it and I'm feeling it. And, we've talked about this. It's like nothing really matters about raising these kids if she and I don't come out on the other end still unified. Like it's all about my wife. And so we developed this little saying, and it's just like we check in with each other all the time. And I just say, you and me? She's like, yep, you and me. It's like, all that really matters is you and me. Doesn't matter that those kids are screaming and bouncing off the walls and it's chaotic right now. That's going to pass. But you and me, we're sticking together. And so that's, I think, just reinforces what we're doing it all for. And sorry, kids, we're actually not doing it for you. Like we're happy to have you and that we brought you into this world and stuff, but our life is not all about you. It's all about my wife and I and our companionship. So that's number one. And then number two is play. Like you got to go play. Like, for example, I just bought a Suzuki DR650 dirt bike. It's an enduro dirt bike. When I was like 12 years old, I owned my first motorcycle I bought with my own money, and I used to ride around the field by my neighborhood. And I have like the best memories of just like feeling the power of the bike under you and like maneuvering the dirt and the berms and the jumps and stuff. And then I put it away after I was about 17 because I was starting to ride on the street and I just got really nervous because, man, like people don't watch out for motorcyclers. And I had some close calls and I was like, I can't ride motorcycles. I got to be responsible. So anyway, now finally, after having all these kids and I'm 44 years old, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get myself a dirt bike again. And I'm playing again. Like I went out riding yesterday. And I am not as aggressive as I was when I was a kid and didn't have any cares or worries in the world. But just having that play time works wonders for your ability to reset, recommit, refocus on work. You got to take time for yourself and play because burnout it's a killer for both individual resilience and for relationship resilience.
Love that. That's great advice to even wrap up here. And gosh, give people, if people want to learn more maybe about resilience and your program, and maybe they want to maybe give a little insight, can they enroll in this with their kids? Give us some insight how they would contact you if they wanted to do some of these programs with resilience.
Absolutely. So I've got some books, I've got some music, I've got a online educational program, as well as I come and do public speaking. And so best way to look that up is either through my website, lifelaunchuniversity.org. That's the online resilience education program.
Okay.
And it can be applied at schools. It can be applied at an individual level. It can be applied in organizational. And then the other place to find is joemansilver.com. Joe Man Silver is my my record label or my handle, and it's a combination of my first name Joe, last name Newman, and then Silver. I was once told that my spirit animal is a silverback gorilla, and so that's part of my persona. And the reason that is the explanation behind that is people sense like a natural strength about me, apparently, which I actually don't even really perceive as much. Actually, like I don't feel like a big silverback gorilla, but people perceive me that way. But those who really know me and get real close to me know my undying loyalty and love and sacrifice, that I will use that strength on their behalf to ensure their happiness and security. Even so, like you think about silverback gorillas, how they're so intimately close to those in their pod that they'll like pick the bugs out of their hair and social groom, like they're that close and hands-on with each other. And that's how I am in my personal relationships. Like I'll do anything for people that care enough to be a part of my tribe or my pod or whatever. So awesome. So that's joemansilver.com or lifelaunchuniversity.org is the best way.
Well, it's been so fun talking with you, Joe. Yeah, I'm excited to connect with you again face to face at one of our events. Hopefully you'll be at some of those events that they host here locally. So I really, really appreciate it. And everyone go check out Joe's websites there. And I heard him do a public speaking event, and I loved every minute of it. I was like, this guy knows how to speak. He's done this a few times. It's not his first rodeo. So definitely hire him to speak at one of your events for like business owners that want to want to help their employees build resilience and stuff. He's amazing. So anyway, appreciate it. And thanks for listening. And thanks, Joe, so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your plug, and thank you for the time being with you, Jeff. It's been great.
Yep, you bet.